Lip gloss poppin'. Is my lip gloss fly? Check it. We gotta see if it is rolling on mine. Oh, she did it. Okay. Ready? Wait, let me get that fast. All right, go ahead. Hit it.
Yeah?
Hit it. Oh, ring the bell. I like it. I'll talk to them about that. All right, 2. Hello, and welcome to the Trebuchet.
Dude.
Do it again. Hello, and welcome to the Trebuchet Podcast. Okay, so it's brought to my attention that being in the military is its own little world. And a lot of times we use shorthand in the military, and you don't even realize that you're using shorthand until you're around civilians. So like that in and of itself, like me referring to civilians as civilians is like part of being in the DOD and the military. So we are gonna do this little thing because I was an officer's wife. I was a lieutenant colonel's wife. So I married my DOD deadbeat when I shouldn't call him that. I'm going to actually really try really hard as this podcast like progresses to separate out my personal feelings for like what's going on in my personal life with this human being and like all that and the information that the rest of the world needs to know as far as like DOD whistleblowing, because my trauma is my trauma and I'm unpacking that with the incredible providers at the Amen Clinic. And I'm gonna probably like record a series on that and just kind of like silo that information somewhere else. But in this space, I'm going to try really hard to make it informative, make it educational, and make it so that like anybody who's watching, whether you're DOD affiliated, DOD meaning Department of Defense, or you're a civilian, you can take what I'm telling you and apply it to your situation. Because maybe you're in a situation with somebody who's, you know, not necessarily in the military, but they're a police officer, or they're in politics, or they're in a position of authority, right? So what this entire podcast is about exposing government level corruption, people not doing their job, federal employees not doing their job, and the real human effects that has. So with that said, I'm gonna I had therapy today, really chef's kiss therapy, not funded by TRICARE. We'll talk about that. It was by a private provider. And it just really helped me get into a good place to record today, to be able to give like the best content that has like the most information. So let's dig in. So I was an officer's wife for 17 years. I'm going through a divorce from a lieutenant colonel. I married him when he was a second lieutenant, and that is what they affectionately call a butter bar. So a butter bar, I guess, because like the gold bar looks like a stick of butter. And I am not even going to pretend to know about enlisted life. If you're an enlisted soldier's spouse in any of the branches, please come on my podcast and chat. I actually have two of my really good girlfriends are Marine wives, and we were stationed together overseas. And Alicia, I think we're gonna ask you to come on. I don't know if she would do it, but she's a badass bitch. And I got my fighting spirit from her. And in the military, at least in the Army, there's this divide between officers and enlisted. And I never really subscribed to it. I mean, I'm an Alaskan. I'm just like wild. I'm just like, I like people. Both of my parents were officers, but we never, and my uncle was an officer, but my grandfathers were both enlisted. But we never really made a big deal about that in our family. It was just kind of like what was expected. The donuts will come into play. This is why I've got these. So as an officer's wife, you are expected to host and entertain and do all of these things in the furtherance of your soldier's career. You know, you're supposed to do FRGs, which is family readiness groups. So you're supposed to do like emergency call chains. You're supposed to like have your soldiers and their kids' birthdays and their spouses' birthdays memorized. And if somebody is deployed, you're supposed to check in on them and make sure, they're doing well. But for me, my entree into military life, and I actually just told this story to a fellow survivor who reached out to me about abuse that they suffered, which if you are in the DOD or you're a DOD dependent, whether you're still active duty or not, please reach out to me. My DMs are open. My team will get this to me. I'm here to help and I'm here to advocate. If you want me to report something, give me their name, give me their branch, give me their information. I'll FOIA that shit and I'll dig all the way to the bottom for you. I got nothing but time. This is literally my full-time job. And since my DOD member requested child support, because life's rough in those streets for lieutenant colonels in the Army, stationed at the Presidio with the highest PH rate in the entire country, I got nothing but time on my hands to do this. So you'd be helping me pay my child support. I know, right? Right, ladies? You stay at home for 16 years raising their kids the way that they want, supporting all their duty station changes, and then you end up paying child support? Wild. Okay, so why the donuts? So we have these things called FRGs, family readiness groups. And what we do with these is, I'm going to have a nice one. I've been wanting this since like, oh, wow, now from the lips. Oh, bad food. A real bad fish, but never. So, but now you're probably getting the, reality of why I never really identified as an officer's wife because I don't have my P's and Q's. I do know how to smile, sit pretty, and be quiet and calm and all that. But I digress. FRGs, family readiness groups. It's like a time for the spouses to get together of all ranks. Usually it's held at like an officer's house, and it's like a time for like the enlisted families or the enlisted wives and the other officers' wives in the brigade or the unit to come and kind of be like, "Ooh, what are you guys doing? How's that?" And you like make everything clean and pretty and sparkly and put on all the, fancy pretty shows. This culture is kind of dying out. By the time that, when I first got into the Army as a military spouse in 2007, 2008, like, the FRG world was still happening. And like I said in this meeting, this conversation I was just having with another survivor. I was at an FRG. We're all sitting around eating donuts and coffee, doing a little coffee talk. That's what they call them, coffee talks. And lots of coffee talks in the DOD and DOS. It's very antiquated. It's very 1950s. The Department of State and the Department of Defense are built on on a single income model with one spouse that is the primary breadwinner or income earner, and then the other spouse is the supporting spouse. Otherwise it'd be really, really, really hard for two people to have a career and have them not be both in the Department of State or the Department of Defense. Now with the world with like virtual this and virtual that, I think it's going to change. I hope it changes. There's some companies that like work specifically with this type of stuff. I met a guy at the inauguration. I think his name is Shane Mack. I need to check in with him. He's got some sort of company that talks about employing entrepreneurs, or not employing entrepreneurs, employing military spouses. And so yeah, maybe it's changing with the world going remote. But back in the day, it was predominantly, and it probably always will be, a one income model, with the soldiers' income being the primary income. So why these FRGs are important, it's because it's like a time for the spouses all to get together and kind of talk shop, and you all kind of like, just the who, what, when, where, why, how. My DOD member used to call it biddies chirping, which is kind of funny, but it was also kind of derogatory. And like I said, I'm going to try really, really, really hard in this podcast to, while I expose whistleblow and I expose the corruption, I also highlight the most amazing parts of military life, because more than anything, like I had to die an ego death when this whole thing ended, because I loved my service member deeply, despite the abuse alleged. And I wanted to make it work at all costs, but unfortunately the DOD warped his brain and weaponized him. And by the end, he wasn't even a human that I recognize. I still don't recognize him. I don't know where he went. I miss the man that he used to be, but I don't know the human that he is now. because the DOD literally weaponized him. But there were good times. And as a military spouse, I can't think of a better way for me to have spent like my 20s and 30s and the experiences that I've had and the fact that I can go into any room and talk to literally anybody, literally anywhere about pretty much anything because of the experiences that I have with the DOD. So while this may seem like just a bashed session, it's really not. What the Trebuchet is, actually, believe it or not, is a love letter to the Department of Defense and the Department of State. They're really, what the fuck's wrong with you? Because I genuinely deeply love our country and I deeply love these institutions, and they're not all bad and there's not all bad actors in them. But when there are bad actors in them, they need to be held accountable. And we need to root that out because President Eisenhower, who my son is named after, everybody thinks my ex named him. I named my son Eisenhower because I'm a historian and President Eisenhower does not get his shine. But President Eisenhower warned in his farewell speech to Congress about the rise of the military-industrial complex. If you watch Joe Rogan or any of those like Dude Bro shows, they talk about it a lot, which Joe, have me on. We can talk about the rise of the industrial military complex. We have an actual Army historian on. And he's not wrong. The U.S. military has essentially created an economy of fueling itself. And so And its lifeblood is the soldier. And without the soldier, they don't have the economy of war and they don't have the economy of defense. And so the DOD really, really, really protects its investments. And that investment is the soldier. They say it's the family. Come on. Raise your hand, class, if you remember what we all get in February during Month of the Military Child. Or maybe it's April, whatever. Oh, you can't remember because it was just like a purple pin or like maybe a t-shirt. It was like, we appreciate you military spouses. We put some balloons out on a mailbox for you. It's like, hey, how about approving our copays for our insurance? How about allowing us to see doctors outside of networks for our kids that have autism in growing numbers, which the DOD doesn't want to look at? Oh yeah, we're going to talk about that. You guys think that like season 1 of this is literally just the fuckery at the Presidio of Monterey and the Family Advocacy Program and the Army Criminal Investigation Division and laying out how you, if you've been fucked over by the DOD, can utilize policies, procedures, people, and protocol to get your answers like I did. Because like I said, Army historian, they told the wrong lady to go fuck off because I was on maternity leave. And somebody literally said to me, his name was Oscar Ordonez. He was the chief of housing at the Army Community, Army Community ACH, Army Community Housing. And he goes, I was trying to get the information about ground leases because the housing in Monterey on base was making people sick. And I was like, I just need to get information on the ground lease. And he's like, it's a waste of time. You'd have to FOIA that information. And I was like, well, I'm on maternity leave and it's my time to waste. And that's how this whole thing started. Literally, that is how this started. I mean, years of abuse coupled with one civilian saying it's a waste of your time to try to figure out why military housing is making everybody sick. I ended up exposing a huge corruption scandal happening at the Presidio of Monterey, then faced insane consequence by my abuser and his cronies. And all of it is so well documented because they just thought I was a crazy person, which I'm not a crazy person. But I'm not like actually crazy. I'm just like traumatized and very obstinate, defiant. And if somebody tells me I can't do something, I'm gonna be like, well, why? Please tell me why. And then if there's still not a reason, I'm gonna just dig in and keep going. Okay, so I was going to spend this episode going through some common terms for civilians, just so that everybody is on the same page. Gotta remember the passcode for this. So this phone is my first burner phone I had to buy because my main phone got turned over to the Army Criminal Investigation Division for 3 days for them to do a data extraction for CID, Army Criminal Investigation Division, to do their investigation. Guess what happened? They returned it 3 days later and then emailed me or called me, I can't remember. I have it documented. I'll pull it up when I do all the disclosures. To tell me they weren't able to do the data extract and wanted to arrange another time. I was like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. You've actually got to be kidding me. The people where I worked at the time went above and beyond in accommodating me, making sure that the Army could come and take this while I was at work. And then they didn't even take the data. Like, are you actually, like, is that, like, that is the level of chicanery that we're talking about? Because the Army CID, Criminal Investigation Division, is the investigative body for any time a soldier or service member does something wrong or criminal. And the local authorities, so even if a soldier, like, commits a crime off base, it's referred to the Army Command or the NCIS or whatever the other branch is. So I'm an Army spouse. I do not know, like, all the other branches. Definitely do your research. The schematics are mostly the same, so you're gonna have different acronyms. These are all Army acronyms. And then DOD is the umbrella. We should do like an infographic where it goes DOD, and it's Army. I'll go in order of the oldest. The oldest is the Army, and then the Marines, I think it's the Marines, and then the Navy, or Marines and Navy, Navy then Marines, and then the Air Force, and then the Coast Guard, and then Space Force, I believe. I just know Army's the oldest. I used to know the order of them. But, so what I'm talking about is all just like Army stuff. Okay, so CID is usually the the investigative body that receives a criminal complaint, and then they investigate. And they specifically tell you, do not do your own investigations, which, thank the Lord, I was conducting like sideline documenting like my own situation, just for my own sanity, for my own healing, for my own trauma recovery. Because had I not been documenting this and this had all just gotten washed away, when somebody finally reached out to tell me that they'd also been hurt at that base, my heart would have been broken because I wouldn't have been able to say like, well, I know exactly who we need to talk to. I now know the who, what, when, where, why, how, to prevent this from ever happening to somebody ever again. And it's really very simple. You simply say, thank you for this information. I'll be FOIAing this. You get names, badge numbers, dates of service. Like, you treat the people who are talking to you in these situations like they're reporting to you. Because guess what? They are. They are reporting to you because you are a tax-paying citizen. Mind blown. Everybody's like, Autumn, why do you care so much about this? Why do you care? Because I pay my fucking taxes. You pay your taxes. We all pay our taxes. We should care because the military is funded by our taxes, which means that all of their jobs, like, I literally paid this, ready for this meta trip, this meta fucking mindfuck. Sorry for the language. Beep. No minors in the room. I paid taxes to our government that went to the military that was then spent on destroying my life. So you better believe that I'm going to create a YouTube channel, monetize this content, and then come back for a reckoning, because I'm going to have to pay those same taxes again. And the next time I pay those taxes, they damn well better be going to a good cause, and they better be serving the people who deserve them, and the people working in those government jobs better be doing their jobs. I, as an Army civilian and as an Army spouse, should not know an Army employee's or a federal employee's job better than they do it. The number of times I went in places and people tried to posture, Colonel Klein, when I came in to discuss toxic housing. And this is before I discovered ChatGPT. I was a researcher and an educator. And like, for me, writing a 69-page report just like in 2 days with a baby that's nursing, like, that's what I do. Like, I'm an educator, I'm a researcher. That's how I escape domestic violence. My doctor, shout out Dr. Ellerson, who's the best. He could see the patterns happening in my marriage, could see the control, could see the abuse, and he was like helping me get through it. But then I went through a pattern of trying to go back to my abuser, which is normal in domestic violence. It's normal to try to go back. It usually takes women an average of 7 times to leave their abuser. And he said to me, "You're an educator, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Let's do this. Read this article." It was on intimate partner violence. And he goes, "And we're going to do a case study on this woman." And I was like, "I love this. Let's do it." So I read this like 30-page journal, and I read all the footnotes, and I did all the things. And then I come back and he's like, "Okay, so woman A, this, and this happens. What would you recommend for her?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, well, I would tell her to do this, and this." And he's like, okay, and I was like, yes, that's me. Yes, I see it. And he's like, okay, so what are you going to do? And seeing it through that other lens, through my educator lens, through my academic lens, where I was able to really break down, I was able to take my emotions out of it and just put the research behind it. That is what really helped me. And it's ultimately how I broke free of the toxic dependency of the military industrial cycle. So there's a resource that I'll share on here. It's called the Power and Control Wheel. The incredible support women, staff at the Monterey Rape Crisis Center. God bless you. You are truly angels. And they were the ones who introduced me to that wheel. And I kept that wheel with me for months as I escaped. I mean, every day I would go to it and I would refer to it and I would watch an old video and I'd document it. And that's the thing that's really hard is in my situation, the DOD failed me as a victim of domestic violence and did not offer trauma-informed counseling, did not offer trauma-informed resources. They just really dropped the ball. And it's why I'm committed to creating this platform so that every single resource that I have come across, civilian or through DOD, I'm getting it to you guys. So as we go through, if there's ever an acronym that I miss, please put it in the comments. If you know what it is and you're a military spouse, put it in there. I'll try to have a moderator. But if not, Google it and then, reference it to this. Oh, I was telling the story about Colonel Klein. Yeah, Colonel Klein called me on my personal cell phone. Oh, wait, this is after. Reversed. I was talking to Oscar Ordonez, the person who basically told me to kiss off and is why this whole thing is even happening in the first place. Oscar, I hope you're enjoying your retirement and not living on the park's housing in the general's house that you were fixing up for yourself and saving, that I busted you on. Wah. Talk about corruption. Talk about nepotism. Talk about kickbacks. Yeah. You didn't think I was paying attention? That one house was where the, what was her name? Vicky. The community manager lived in one of the old general's houses on Fort Ord, and he and Oscar was fixing up the other one for him. Dirty government kickbacks. Dirty. Okay. And the military knew about this. The Presidio knew, and they didn't do anything. Chain of command knew, didn't care. That's what we're talking about. So anyways, Oscar told me to kick rocks. He goes, well, if you really, have such an issue with it, you could take it up with Colonel Klein. He is the garrison commander. And I was like, sounds great. What's his email? Which was such a posturing, rude thing for him to do, and brings us back to the beginning of this episode, which is where I'm going to leave it. Had Oscar done that to an enlisted spouse and been like, well, if you really have a concern with the mold in your house that's making you and your baby so sick and with building-induced illness, you can take it up with a garrison commander, which is take it up with the president as far as people are concerned. Because a lot of these military spouses are brand new to the military. They're 22, 23, and they're getting sick as all get out from this housing that's making them sick. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. Toxic military housing, mold in on-base military housing, housing corruption scandals. The DOD knows. Everybody knows. Senator Kennedy, you and I are supposed to connect on this. The chief of staff for your Maha Alliance was going to connect us. I don't know what happened to that, but go ahead and give me a call and we'll fix this. But yeah, like I said, the DOD knows about this toxic housing. And when I was trying to get information from Oscar, he kicked back and goes, well, if you really want to talk about it, you could talk to Colonel Klein. And I was so pissed because I thought, well, first of all, yeah, I'll go talk to Colonel Klein. I had no idea that he was a Penn Stater and went to college with my now soon-to-be ex-husband. I didn't know that connection at the time. I just thought, sure, I'll go talk to the garrison commander and I'll go in there and I'll have all my documentation. I'll be like, hey, this is a problem and we need to do something about it to help other military families. So I go in, which again, this speaks to the difference between a lieutenant colonel's wife and an enlisted wife. If an enlisted wife went in, Colonel Klein probably could have gotten all whatever and be like, did you submit an ICE complaint? Did you do this? And talk down to them because he sure tried with me. But I've worked for senators. I've worked for high-ranking military officers. I've worked for executives. I don't balk, obviously. He was one of my husband's peers. So at the time my husband was a major, he was promotable. So he was almost a lieutenant colonel. And he ended up getting pinned by another fellow ROTC, Penn State ROTC. You guys see the circle here? Penn State. You guys really got to, whatever is in your drinking water up there in Happy Valley, got a lot of predators, a lot of not good people. You need to clean up that alumni network because you're embarrassing yourself out here on the streets. Okay, where was I going with that? As an officer's wife, my husband was getting ready to pin Lieutenant Colonel. Oh, Colonel Keep It pinned him, which is like, tell me there's no nepotism without telling me there's no nepotism. When all my DOD stuff started shaking out in the domestic violence, I reached out to Colonel Keep It, told me to kick rocks. I actually reached out to his wife as well. And like through a personal channel. And that as a military spouse is what hurt the most, is like she knew we were in the shit and she ghosted. And then she like gave her husband the information that he needed, but then he didn't do his job. And so like as a military spouse, I was pretty let down by her. Because like we are supposed to look out for each other, but also as a military spouse, I totally get it. You cover down for your soldier. So this disclosure process is going to be laden with so many like, yeah, that was pretty fucked up of them. But also I get it, because if I was in her shoes and I was, trying to protect a senior leader's career who's been in the military like 22 years, of course. But at the time, here's the thing. They didn't have anything to protect because nothing really, 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 really horrific had gone on besides the abuse. I was like, hey, can we like handle this discreetly? Again, I will unpack all of that later because that's part of the disclosures. Like I'll show my emails between all of these commanders. And this is all FOIA information. So if you've been hurt by anybody at a military base, right now, the number one thing that you can do is get their name, their rank, their like anything about them, like literally where they've served, anything. And then you start tracking down FOIA offices. So Google it, Freedom of Information Office 4, and then do their last known assignment. If you've got their military address, do a FOIA for their military address. Just do a FOIA and then say, and get ChatGPT to write it for you. I'd like to do a Freedom of Information Act disclosure for all emails from this email, and you've got to cite their military email or just cite them because they all have like DOD, DOS, .mil, whatever emails, and say regarding this subject. The FOIA will come back and they'll say, well, it's a lot of information. Do you have a time frame? You're like, yes, from this date to this date, I would like the information. And they'll say, well, it's a lot. And it's like, okay, from this date to this date with this topic or like with this information in it. And so that's how you're going to have to get specific, and it's going to take you some time. But if you've been maimed by the DOD and it's like still in your craw, then here you go. That's how you go in and get that information. And like I said, these soldiers had the opportunity to do the right thing as it was happening when I came to them and begged them for help, and they didn't. And it comes down to the DOD at all costs protects its soldiers, and the soldier at all costs actually ends up only protecting themselves. Very few of these men would ever throw themselves on the sword for their families or for other military families. Colonel Greg Ford is a hero, deserves accolades, and he is the exception. He was really pivotal in helping support military families in the toxic housing disputes that are going on against these private housing providers. Okay, so the end of that story is Oscar, I don't know if he knew I was a lieutenant colonel's wife or a major's wife about to be a lieutenant colonel or just didn't care, but he was disrespectful and told me to kick rocks and said, well, if you're not happy with this, you could take it up with Colonel Ford or Colonel Klein. And I was like, okay. So I wrote up a 69-page report, walked into Colonel Klein's office. He was like, hi, how can I help you? And I was like, well, I'm actually here to talk about this, this, and this. And he's so arrogant. He slides across the Tenant's Bill of Rights and he goes, well, Mrs. Seibel, have you read this? Slides it across the table to me. And I was like, as a matter of fact, I have. Thank you. You're currently in violation at this base of Section 5, 6, 7, 11, and 14 if we're going to get technical. And here's a 69-page report with footers and all of your employees who are in violation of all of these policies. Shall we proceed? And that's when he was like, oh. And then he actually started to kind of be nice to me. He's like, oh, so tell me about you. And that's when the Penn State fuckery came in because he's like, oh, so your husband's a Penn Stater, huh? These men, it's just this, Anyways, I pushed back against authority multiple times. After that, Colonel Ford said, well, keep in touch with Oscar and you'll just get more information as this unfolds and we'll go from there. And I was like, okay. So I reached back out to Oscar. Of course, he's not going to give me the information. I reach out to the private housing providers. Of course, they're not going to give me the information. I go to a town hall. Of course, they're not going to give me the information. But I just start digging. And finally, Oscar kicks back and he goes, well, if you really want that information, you're going to have to FOIA it. And I'm like, oh, now I feel bad for you, bro. Like, you don't realize that not only did you insult me because you told me that it was my time to wait, like I was wasting my time trying to find this information because I was a stay-at-home mom at the time. I just had a baby. I was like, it's my maternity leave. I'll waste it if I want. You also just like tried to use so you positioned Colonel Klein as this power move to try to scare me off. Then you tried to use FOIA to scare me off. Not okay. Not even a little bit okay. How fucking dare you? Literally, how dare you? If I was an enlisted spouse and I was like 21 years old, if that had happened to me as a second lieutenant's wife, a first lieutenant's wife, a captain's wife, I would be like, oh my gosh, she like said I have to go to FOIA and I don't even know what that means, but I know that these kids are getting sick and we're all sick and I don't know what to do. Fuck you, as a matter of fact. How dare you use your position of authority to try to intimidate a spouse? There are other spouses at that base who actually ended up having the courage to go and talk to these senior leaders because I did. And they're like, Autumn, weren't you scared? I was like, no, he's literally just a human being, puts his pants on one leg at a time, and isn't that great of a human being, I'll be honest. Just go talk to him. And the amount of respect I lost for senior leaders in this process, like, is galling. Because I used to be a very good Army wife. I was a very well-behaved Army wife. And now I'm just like, fuck it. Because for me, it really came down to something, and this is how we're going to end this, something that I heard at an FRG meeting. And this is what I was talking to that spouse about, or I'm sorry, that survivor about, which, sorry guys, my brain is like a runaway train. It always has been, but it always pulls back into the circle, always pulls back into the station. And that's like the teacher in me being like, the bell's about to ring, let's close this all up. At our FRGs, at the very first FRG I ever went to, when my soldier was a second lieutenant, I was sitting there listening, drinking a cup of coffee, and there was this group of enlisted wives, and they were wenching. They were really getting after it. This is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. That's why, like, FRGs are sometimes fun, and sometimes, like a good FRG is, like, you're, like, getting, like, a little bit wasted, and your soldiers are deployed, and the kids are in bed, and you're just like, woo, like, it's fun time. I've had some fun FRGs, especially during the deployment years, like, 2008 spouses to 2012, where you at? Peak warriors, where you at? Man, just built on my RV. I should not be doing like party squalls for deployment because that's a whole other can of trauma. Oh, God, I had so much information about the DOD. I could literally talk for days. Point of the story is, let's go coffee. I'm at my FRG group. And this list and this group of older, like they're probably my age now, like in their 40s. Well, I'm not 40, 39, but they were older. Enlisted wives who'd been in for probably 20 years. So here I am, a second lieutenant's wife, 2007, 2008. I'm brand new to the military. They've probably been in since at least the 90s, which is crazy for me to think. Shoot, if they'd been in for 20 years at that point, they would have gotten in like the 80s? No, do math, Autumn. 2008 minus 10 is 1990. Yeah, whoa. So they would have been like Desert Storm wives and like Operation Enduring, they would have seen they were like Bush and Reagan years. Because this was during the Obama administration. Anyways, they were bitching about something that happened at the gate. And they were like, well, it's never going to change. Somebody's got to change it. And then somebody comes over and they goes, oh, what, you haven't heard? And they changed that. And they go, what do you mean? It just happened to me when I came through the gate. And they go, oh, well, it happened to Jenny. And her husband's the garrison commander. And so they stopped it. And, like, I'm not going to use her real name. I'm just going to call her Jenny. She was a badass. Like, she was, like, one of those, like, Army wives. I was like, you're badass. You're like what I want to be when I, actually, I'll call her. I'm not going to say her last name. But her name was Jago. I was like, I want to be like Jago. Like, Jago from the block. Like, I want to be like that when I am an Army senior leader's wife because she's badass and like she just had such a command about her. Was just a very cool person. Anyways, whatever it was that happened, either happened to her or the garrison commander's wife, and the situation got resolved. And then And then the enlisted wives kept going because they just were really tearing in, and I loved it. And they said, see, that's the thing. Nothing ever changes unless it happens to an officer's wife. And at the time I was like, oof, man, bitter Betty's like, whoa. And then I, over time, discovered what they meant. And it's absolutely true. Things generally do not change until it happens to a senior leader and they decide that they have had enough and they want the system to change, or their spouse has been inconvenienced, or their child has been inconvenienced. That sucks, but it's the reality. And I'm here to hopefully change that. But also, I am now that senior leader's wife who experienced devastating domestic violence and corruption at the hands of the DOD. And over my dead body, will I let it happen to anybody ever again? All right. Thank you for coming to this FRG. Next time, I might actually get into acronyms. And that's all for now. Bye.